Hi, so this recording is for week 4. We're going to be going over how to make a good cartographic product or a map, and we're going to be showing you how to add in the title, legend, scale bar, scale text, all of the stuff that you need on a map. What I've loaded in here is the United States shapefile from week 1, the temp precip shapefile that we looked at last unit in week 3, and I have the world imagery loaded in from ArcGIS Online. So that's the data that we're working with. I've projected my map by clicking on my data frame properties to North America Lambert conformal conic, so a projection that makes sense for the 48 states that we're looking at. So first off, we're going to symbolize some data, make a choropleth map, and then we're going to go ahead and make a map out of this. So let's just set up a scenario here. Let's say we want to symbolize the United States and make it a choropleth map by population. So if we look on the attribute table of the states here, so I opened up the attribute table, I right-clicked and opened attribute table. And this is some older data, but let's say we want to make a choropleth map out of the population in the year 2003. And as you can see here, we have a column in our attribute table that has that information. Again, what a choropleth map is symbolizing data based on different classes, and each class gets a separate color in the GIS map. Remember from lecture in the PowerPoint that generally speaking, the human eye or the human brain can comprehend 5 to 7 classes of data. So let's go ahead and symbolize our data like that. So we're going to right-click on the states. We're going to go to Properties, Symbology, and we're doing quantities since we're dealing with numbers here, and we want to do graduated colors, and we're going to pick Pop 2003. You can pick how many classes you want. 5, 6, or 7 is what we would want to use. You can use less or more, but let's go ahead and do 5. Click OK, and there we have our choropleth map, our 5-class choropleth map of population in the United States in 2003. So this is a graduated color map. If we wanted to do the same thing with temp precip that we worked with last week, remember this information shows temperature and precip per month for the United States. Now this would be a little different if we want to set up a choropleth map of this information. I'm going to go ahead and turn the states off, and I'm going to turn the reference map on. I'm going to double click temp precip. I'm going to go to symbology. Again, we're going to do quantities, but this time if we wanted to show precipitation in the United States, average precipitation, instead of colors we would do symbols, because obviously the bigger the dot, the more precipitation that area gets. So I'm going to do graduated symbols. I'll choose PYR since we want to see precipitation per year. You can see it automatically gives you 5 classes. You can adjust that up or down if you like. I'll keep it at 5, and then it has brown dots here, and the bigger the dot, the more precipitation. If you want to change the color of those dots, you can simply double click the dots. For example, I might change the smaller dots to red because they're the driest. And the next bigger one, maybe yellow. After that, a light green, then a dark green, and then maybe a blue for the wettest parts. And there's our choropleth map, or this is a graduated symbol map of precipitation per year in the United States. Now remember, when we went over in the last unit, Unit 3, this is useful to do because, one, we could certainly look at an Excel spreadsheet and gather information about the United States in terms of precipitation, but it's much easier to pick out patterns and look at what's going on if we use a GIS. For example, we can readily pick out the pattern right now that precipitation gets more precipitation in the United States there's more precipitation in the U.S. as you move from west to east. The one outlier in this is the Pacific Northwest, Washington and Oregon. Again, easy to pick out these patterns on a GIS map. The same with the United States choropleth map. Where's most of the population? California, Texas, the East Coast. We could look at an Excel sheet and pick this information out, but it would take us longer, and it's not as interactive as a GIS. So that's kind of the power that the GIS brings us. Let's say we wanted to make a map of this population in 2003. So we want to, again, the way GIS people communicate is with maps. So we need to know how to make good cartographic products to show what exactly we're trying to communicate. Right now we are in data view, and to make our map we need to be in layout view. So let's go ahead, there's a button down here, little button, there's data view, which we're currently in, and let's click on layout view. And I'm going to pause the recording while it's drawing here. Okay, we're back now. My map is drawn. I went ahead and turned off the world imagery just so that it would draw faster. And since the colors are shaded in, we're not really going to see the world imagery anyway. So we're just going to make this map without the world imagery right now. If we were doing the temp precip, I would certainly want that world imagery turned on. But as it is now, we'll just make it without. So when we hit layout view, you can see that my map automatically comes up with a 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. That's the default that you can build your map on. You can make that size bigger or smaller, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. Also, the default is to have your paper oriented to portrait. Now, since the United States is wider than it is taller, it'd probably be better to change this map to landscape. So to do that, let's go to File, Page and Print Setup. Now here's where you can change the size of your map if you want to. I always check this box, use printer paper settings, because what that does is it's going to put a dotted line around the map that shows the margins of the printer in case I wanted to print it. Here you can also change the size. If you can pick a size in here that they have programmed in to the software. You can also change it from portrait to landscape, which we want to do. 11 by 17, you can pick a different size. If we had a plotter hooked up, you could pick bigger sizes like 24 by 24, things like that. You can also custom size your map. And to do that, you would uncheck the printer paper settings, and you could just type in whatever size you want. For example, 24 by 24 or whatever. We'll just make this an 8.5 by 11. So we're going to use the printer paper settings as I'm hooked up to an 8.5 by 11 printer, and we're going to change it to landscape. So watch what happens when I do that. Okay, so my map is now oriented landscape. Here's this faint dotted line here. That shows the margins of the printer that we're hooked up to. And everything that I want to put on this map needs to be inside this faint dotted line. So I'm going to grab my data frame here. I'm just going to click on it, and I need to resize this. And I'm going to fit it inside that faint dotted line. Okay? So there's my United States choropleth map. Notice we have a lot of white space here, okay? So what I'm going to do is use the zoom tool from the standard toolbar, and I'm going to zoom in more on my data to fill some of that white space up. If you don't like the color white, you could also double click your data frame properties, and I believe you can go to frame and you can change the background, for example, to light blue if you wanted to do that, or pick another color if you didn't like white. Now would be a good time to point out, now I use the zoom tool here on the standard toolbar to zoom in and out of my data. Keep in mind when we went to layout view, there's a layout toolbar that popped up. Now there's a big difference between the two, and I'll show you what I mean here. If we use the zoom tool from the standard toolbar, let's say we zoom in on Wyoming, it takes the data and zooms it in, okay? Let me go back to the United States. Now if we use the zoom tool on the layout toolbar, notice what happens. It just takes the whole entire map and brings it closer to us. Now that's useful for us, and I'll show you in a second when we add in scale bar and scale text and such, but just notice the difference between the two toolbars. One takes your map and moves it back and forth, for example, closer to your face. The other tool actually zooms the data in and out. So sometimes that's a little confusing to students, but if you play around with those two toolbars, I think you'll see what I'm talking about. Now this button I just clicked, the zoom to whole page, that's if you're zoomed in really close on the map and you want to get back so you can see the whole map, just hit zoom to whole page and there you are, okay? All right, let's go ahead and start talking about some map elements that we need. Now the first thing a map has, that all maps have, and that I want you to learn how to add in this class is a title. Now everything you're going to want to learn to add to a map is in this insert button right here. So let's click insert and let's do title. So you can see the title it adds, whatever your data frame is called, is what it calls the map. We can double click on this and let's change the title of it. So appropriate title for this map might be population in the United States, year 2003. And you can hit the change symbol button and you can bold the title, you can make it a little bigger. For example, I'll bump it up to size 24. You can even change the color if you wanted to. I'm just going to leave mine at black, but you can certainly edit that title to whatever you want it to look like. Title on maps are usually up at the top of the map, okay? Maybe sometimes to the left or maybe to the right, but almost always you will see the title at the top of the map. Next thing, let's add in the legend, okay? So let's insert legend, and what pops up is this legend wizard, okay? Now the way this wizard works is everything that's on the left-hand side here in this box is what you have in your table of contents. Everything that's in the right-hand side is what you want to have in the legend. So the only thing we want to show in this legend right now is just the United States data, and that's why it's in here. If we wanted to add the temp precip, we would need to highlight it and click this arrow over, and you can see it adds the temp precip data. We don't want to add this to this map, so we're going to highlight temp precip and push the button that moves it back to the left, and we can get it out of there, okay? So this legend's pretty simple. We only have one thing in there. Let's click next. You can title your legend. Sometimes it's just legend is fine. Sometimes people type in the word explanation. Sometimes people don't have a title. I like to use the word legend. You can change how that looks with the color, size, bold it, whatever. I always like to put a border around my legend. Also, I usually do a white background. You can do whatever color you want though. And you can put a drop shadow around it if you want. Generally, I don't do that, but feel free to play around with that if you want to. Here you can change how items in the legend look. For example, we're just dealing with squares right here, so if you don't want that little square to be a square, you could pick a different kind, rectangle, ellipse, whatever. If I was showing streams on my map, for a line, I might choose flowing water. We don't have any streams on my on this map, but just as an example. But I'll just leave it at the square for the square at this time, although just keep in mind you can change how these items look in the legend. This is how things are spaced in the legend. I generally don't mess with this stuff. I just leave it at default. The spacing is usually pretty good the way it is. So let's just click finish. And so here's the legend. And generally speaking, the legend, you can size this legend bigger or smaller. I'll size it down a tad. So this is the legend that we added. Now there's a couple things I would change to this legend. For one, I don't like that underscore in there. And do we even need the word United States? Probably not. So honestly, what I'm going to do is click in my table of contents. I'm going to click on the word United States once, and I'm going to click it again, and I'm going to delete it. And once we do that, you can see it deletes it out of our legend. Pop 2003, if someone didn't know what this map was about, that wouldn't really mean anything to them. So let's change this to population YR 2003. That makes a little more sense. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add some columns to my numbers here. So I'm going to click in here. I'm going to, a little tedious, but I think it makes the numbers a little bit easier to read. Easier way to do this might be to double click on this, and you can do this in maybe it's easier to do it in the table of contents here. I think it is. Just make sure you put your columns in the right place. And as you can see, as we do this, whatever you change in your table of contents, it changes the way your legend looks. Okay. One thing I'd like to point out here is you might be saying to yourself, wow, this legend's pretty small. People aren't going to be able to read it. Remember, this map is sort of zoomed out from us. A handy button to hit to look at this stuff is there's a button called Zoom to 100% in your layout toolbar. And what this button does is when you hit it, it will zoom into the map and it will show you what things will look like if you were looking at it on a piece of paper and you had printed it out. So you don't have to sit there and print out a bunch of maps to see what things look like. Simply hit this one-to-one button, and this is what the legend will look like if you were to print it out on a piece of paper. Now I would say this legend is even a little bit too big, so I might size this guy down just a tad. That looks a little better. So again, we hit the one-to-one button, and this is what the legend will look like. Plenty readable. Notice I missed some commas here. Let me add that in. And so that's a good size for the legend. Again, I hit the one-to-one button, and that shows you what the map will look like if you were to print it out on a piece of paper. To get back to the whole entire map, remember, hit the zoom to whole page button. Okay? So we've got legend, got the title. Let's go ahead and add in a scale bar. You can pick from any scale bar you want. I generally choose this alternating scale bar 1. I just like the way it looks, but you can pick any one you want. Once you choose it, hit Properties. Now for a map of this scale showing the whole United States, a good unit for this map might be miles, or if we were in Europe, we would use maybe kilometers. If we were showing a map of, say, Casper, or even the campus at Casper College, instead of miles, we might want to use feet. So make sure you match the appropriate division unit with the scale of map that you have. This is a small scale map. Again, shows a lot of area, but not a lot of detail. So miles would be appropriate for this. You can play around with the divisions and subdivisions. I generally use 2 of each. So change that, appropriate units, click OK. And there's our scale bar. Now the nice thing about the scale bar in ArcGIS is it automatically fits it to whatever scale your map is at. Okay. The other thing I like to have my students add to the map is, let's go up to Insert and let's add in Scale Text. Now these numbers are just example numbers. We're using miles for our map, so let's choose the 1 inch equals 16 miles example. Again, our map isn't actually 1 inch equals 16 miles, but it's those numbers are just examples. So let's click OK. And as you can see here, our map is actually 1 inch equals 266 miles. Now, if someone needed to measure on this map for whatever reason, that 266 is kind of a weird number. So maybe we want to round that number up or down. Let's say we want to, let's change it to 1 inch equals, let's say 300 miles. That's a better number to measure with. Now to do that, it's easy. Just click up here to your map scale box and simply type in 1 inch equals 300 miles and hit enter. Now look at what it did. It changed the scale to 1 inch equals 300 miles. Look at our scale text. That's what it now reads. And what I like to do is click on my scale bar and size that down so that at least one of the numbers reads 300. So if someone held a ruler up to it, they could see that this map is in fact 1 inch equals 300 miles. Okay? So I think that's important. Get the scale of your map. If it's kind of an odd number to measure with, for example, we had 266, round it up or down to something that's a little more manageable if someone needed to measure with it. And then adjust your scale bar to show at least somewhere one of the numbers to show what the scale of your map is. Let's see, next let's add in a north arrow. So insert north arrow. Again, you've got quite a few options to choose from. You can pick whichever one you like. Most of the time I think simple is better, so I usually choose this Esri north arrow number 3, but again, you can pick whatever you want, whatever kind of map you're doing. North arrow might be more appropriate than others, but I'm going to do this Esri north arrow 3. And I'm going to insert it here in my map. Next thing to add, let's add in, we need to know who made the map, so the author, we need to know the date the map was made, and we need to know where you got your data. Okay, so let's insert, to put all that information in, let's insert text. So you can see when I did that, it inserted a text box here in the middle of the map. When it does that, I like to just type in some gibberish kind of. And then I like to move that text box down in the corner and then double click it and then add in the information that I want. So let's do author. That is me. So Jeff Sun. The date. Today's date is March 23rd, 2015. And then source. Where did I get this data? This particular data came from the Census Bureau, so and I got it from their website, so the source is census.gov. I'm gonna left adjust this. You can center it or right adjust it if you want. click OK, and there's the information. Remember, keep in mind it's always good to make your map balanced. We've got the title up at the top, legend to the left, north. I might move my scale bar, scale text, north arrow maybe I'll put here just to make the map a little more balanced looking. You don't want all your items over on one side or the other. You want things to be balanced. The other thing we might do is maybe label the states. So maybe I'll double click on the states and go to labels. And let's label them, we could do state abbreviation. Maybe put a halo around the labels so we can see them a little better. Again, I double click the states data, go to the labels tab. I'm going to go to symbol, edit symbol. I'm going to put a halo around it. I went to mask. Just a little easier to see. I'm going to save my map in case ArcMap crashes here. So let's go File, Save As. I'm just going to save it to my desktop. Call this map Unit 4 Pop 2003. So there's our map. Again, we took our population data, we double-clicked it and went to symbology, did graduated colors, and we made a 5-class choropleth map showing the population in 2003. We made a map out of this. Again, we inserted our title, legend, scale bar, scale text, north arrow, and then our author, date, and source by adding in a text box. And now we can either print this map out, we could go to File, Print, and print it, or if we want to export this as a PDF and send it to someone, we could go File, Export Map. We could save it as a PDF. I could just save this on my desktop. Here's the PDF right here. We can open this PDF. You can also save it as a JPEG or whatever you wanted to do, but there's the PDF of our map, and we could email this to someone, turn it in on the Moodle site for me to grade, whatever you wanted to do. So you have several different options. Or like I said, in ArcMap you can print the map as well out of your printer. Hope this video was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions. But again, that's how you make a map with all the various map elements in ArcGIS. Thanks, and we'll see you guys later.